You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com. The views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Engineering or technology, when you talk about writing and reading, when you're talking about the refinement of speech, when you talk about grammar or the dialectic, or if you're talking about concepts of astronomy or music.
The people from the Nile Valley were the very first people to develop a concept of time. Time is a concept that sprang from the minds of African people. They were the first people to divide the day into 24 hours. They were the first people to develop the calendar, 365 and a quarter days. They were the first people to build with stone. They were the first people to develop systems of education, the first universities. They invented writing. They invented paper. They developed libraries. They were the first physicians, the first psychologists, the first dentists, the first brain surgeons. They were the first governors, the first rulers, the first men and women to orient structures to celestial bodies in order to harness the spiritual energy that's generated within a structure that is properly aligned to celestial spheres. So in other words, they were human beings who knew how to manifest the power of God on earth.
Welcome everyone to tonight's radio show. Welcome to the Melanated Roots radio show, and we have a live show for you this evening. Your host for the show is Brother Tommy and Brother Rio, and our topic for today is the opening of the way and how true consciousness is the only way to remove ourselves from the illusion and the entrapments of slavery. If you would like to ask a question or share some information on this topic, please call 866-510-9025. In addition, enable to support the radio station, because this is brought to you live by the Black Talk Radio Network. We ask that you would join the BTR community for $24 a year. And this is a way in which we can talk and dialogue amongst people with like minds. And that way we can exchange ideas and also move forward the platform. Brother Rio, are you with me this evening?
I am, brother.
I'm doing good. Could you come to the mic a little bit better?
Hold on just a second. Is that better?
Excellent. How you doing, sir? How you feeling, and how you feeling about the information and topic that we want to discuss tonight?
I'm feeling pretty good, man. You know, working through a few technical difficulties, you know, here in Georgia, and you know, we're getting pounded by a little bit of rain, but I can't complain, you know, based on what the rest of this country is going through. But you know, I think we still got some powerful information. You know, I don't have complete access to it, but, you know, I know you got some powerful information, so we're just going to take our time. We're going to go through it, and, you know, we're going to have a powerful, dynamic show. You know, audience participation is always welcome, so, you know, don't hesitate to call or jump in with your comments or questions or statements, and, you know, just raise your hand, and we'll make sure you get on there so that you can be heard.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you a question, Brother Rio. I had noticed that they had put the state of Georgia underneath FEMA management, that all 100 and something counties are under a disaster area. And so they've called an emergency disaster area. And right now FEMA has control over the states. Were you aware of that? And based upon the type of weather that we are experiencing in Georgia, do you see a reasoning for that severity of FEMA, brother?
I was not aware of that. I know that Atlanta itself is, more in the northern part of Georgia, but, you also have some coastal areas such as Savannah, which I believe, that was an area that was supposed to be hit pretty hard by rain and flooding and things of that nature. So locally, if I was to think about it, I wouldn't think that, this particular area may be under any kind of disaster protocol, but I could see it, as we move further south or, towards the coastline.
Yeah. I definitely.
I'm not aware of how those cities are faring, at this particular time. I'm getting some feedback, brother.
You're coming over the air pretty clean. What are you experiencing?
I'm getting an echo.
Okay, well that echo is not being heard on the main station.
Okay.
So, but the reason why I asked is that we've all been discussing these weather patterns and the different things and storms and hurricanes and things that have been going on throughout the country and worldwide, for that matter. And, a lot of people are definitely, looking at the characteristics of a lot of these different storms and seeing that these are having characteristics that are outside of being natural, outside of the natural things that we are aware of. So we are looking into the evidence in which we are seeing, and the evidence is pointing a lot of people to the chemtrails, to HAARP, CERN, and other military programs that they have in place to control the weather or to participate in weather wars. So based upon what you're saying, we're seeing heavier rain maybe in the southern part of the state, but to have the entire state under an emergency and to give control to FEMA and shut down 189 counties when we're experiencing just moderate rain, that just seems a little odd to me. It just seems like it's just a little too much.
Well, I agree with you about the about the government coming in and seizing control, but with these winds and sometimes there are different locations in Georgia. Once they get a little rain and those trees get to swaying, they can fall and snap some power lines pretty easily. So I really can't speak to the more rural areas located throughout, Georgia. So, there may be some people who are in some dire straits, even though they're not experiencing the same level of weather as in other places like in Florida or in Houston. But, I'm not going to belittle their circumstances, but I do definitely feel you on the seizing of the opportunity of FEMA to come in and what would seem to be, no longer simulated practices, but, live time and real time reaction response training, so that they can, adapt, adjust, and, continue with the plans of how they want to roll things out.
And that's what
I was.
And that's where I was kind of coming on, and like more of a test run, to roll out and to put things in place and see, the response from the people, how the people receive, certain authorities coming into their neighborhoods and communities. So I agree with you. I just feel like it's a test run, almost just putting their ducks in a row and seeing what the response from the people is, so that they can better understand, if they decide to come with part 2 or part 3, that they have a better way in which they can make sure that they take control in an immediate fashion.
Well, brother, what I did find very powerful was the video that you sent me of a young lady, Zaza Ali, I believe her name was, and how she was documenting pretty much, the evolution of these climatic changes or geoengineering, as well as, how it's come to pass over time. And she was having some videos where she was showing how, through satellite imaging and different weather maps, you can see the path that these hurricanes are taking. And, you know, it resembled a video game. I mean, the way that these hurricanes were moving, and you could tell that they were being guided or steered because, you know, if left alone to nature, you know, the patterns that these hurricanes have exhibited over, you know, hundreds of years or since they've been recording these natural disasters, you can tell something is foul, something's amiss, you know, and you can just see the evolution of, you know, how they are plotting, planning, and moving these hurricanes to different locations until, you know, they perfected it, and, you know, now they can guide them exactly to where they want to go. But it's definitely not what we would call a natural or a movement that occurs in nature when nature is in full control. Correct.
Yeah, I feel you. It's just a trip when you really look and see how sinister the mindset is of those who want to basically continue to control or utilize a certain level of control on the masses of the people. I mean, displacement, you know, I'm starting to really understand that the displacement of people is really a strong tool in the hands of the oppressor, because when people are displaced, it puts them into a vulnerable position. And right now you're dealing with displacement of people going on all across the world. And a lot of people really don't understand at what level this displacement is at. If you look at one of the refugee camps in Kenya from other Africans coming from war-torn areas, you know, it's 260,000 people in one refugee camp. So the displacement of people is a tool that they're utilizing, in my opinion, and control of the weather and pushing storms and heavy water in different directions is more towards that aim, displacement of people, which weakens people's ability to fight against a particular force.
Brother Tommy, let me hit you with this, because this is some thoughts that I were having. Because we have, you know, we tried to illustrate how these, the people in power have put in place plans, you know, all coming down from the doctrine of discovery to manifest destiny, which we know gives way to eminent domain. And, you know, this seems to me to be the next strategic plan. Again, like you were saying, the displacement of people for the purpose of, you know, who knows, whatever they feel, you know, justified in putting there once they have the people removed. You know, we know some of it's going to be gentrification, as well as, you know, just the overall general advancement of whatever plots and plans that they have on the table. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And can you see that as a line of the thinking and the actions that they have implemented throughout history?
Oh yeah, I agree. It's just a movement according to certain lines of thinking. You know, like you're talking about in terms of the manifest destiny. You know, their different agendas, their way about dominating and controlling, you know, the earth and the inhabitants of the earth. Everything that they do is in lockstep with that goal. You know, so I agree with you that, yeah, that's what that is. It's just a continuation of Europeans pillaging the earth.
Because again, like you were saying, you have people who are being displaced. You know, if these people are indigenous to the land, and once they are displaced, you know, and they are given the label of refugee, you know, they've pretty much given up their sovereignty, their self-determination. I mean, they're not tied to the land anymore. Right. Because, I mean, they had no choice but to abandon the land. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, the powers that be are going to come right in. They're going to swoop in, and they're going to bring in, you know, the good old boys, you know, Halliburton and, you know, all these other companies. They're going to come and, you know, quote unquote, rescue the infrastructure and start to rebuild. And, you know, they're going to rebuild it to a level that only a certain level of people who make a certain amount of income or get a certain amount of privileges are going to be able to come in and, pick up the pieces and then continue to build from there. Mm-hmm. Whereas the people who are displaced, they're not going to have the ability, because this is one thing that I've seen, brother. When the administration have changed how people can file for insurance and the amount of insurance that they can get. But if the area is declared a natural disaster, well, those are acts of God. So, it's going to be, considerably more difficult to get any amount of money, not just how much you're supposed to get, but any amount of money out of these insurance agencies. So a lot of these people are not going to be able to afford or be in a position to come back and even claim what is, supposed to be theirs, what they paid into and what they were promised. Mm-hmm. And it's just, man, it's just, I don't know what to say, man. It's just, it's heartbreaking, but
yes, it is.
It's just scandalous, man. I mean, the psychology of individuals who put these kind of schemes into place.
Right,
it's just hard to say.
But the thing about it, Brother Real, is the scheming and the psychology of people who would put these things in place is one thing that they know that they have to be able to do to put these things in place is they have to understand you, and they have to understand you and your kind and your makeup, what triggers you, what doesn't trigger you, and they have to control aspects of your divinity for them and know how to control that for them to be able to implement this game plan in the first place. So the fact that they understand the constituent elements of man and the different aspects of man that create his thoughts, his behavior, his attitude, his aggressiveness, his kindness, and all these different things, when they understand that, and the man himself that's walking around doesn't understand that, and they're manipulating it, so they're able to manipulate and continuously keep people within a certain mindset because they understand something about you and your makeup that you don't. So therefore the enslavement of people on this plane continues.
Well, not only that, brother, but they also keep you ignorant to the point where they keep most of the masses, they keep them ignorant to the point of when they hear the truth, not only do they reject it, they fight against it just because, they're not aware of, their ancestry and who they really are. So, sometimes it's an uphill battle because, you have to fight against a person's lack of knowledge, but also the ego that has been fed and has bought into a society that has been structured to keep them from realizing that information that would truly raise them up to become self-determined.
Yes, sir.
So, we're dealing with, double walls or more than one prison. Sometimes it's a prison of their own making. Because you can't force people. You can't force their eyes open. You can't force them to acknowledge things that they're not ready to acknowledge. But we need people to kind of step forward and start questioning the system and the things that are going around. We like to call ourselves a conscious community, but how conscious can we be when you mentioned chemtrails and, they spraying chemtrails like crazy. You can look up in the sky and you can see them, pretty much every day.
Yes, sir.
But how many people are really asking questions? What are they doing? Why are they doing that? If you believe in the political system, writing letters to your congressman or going down to City Hall, asking questions, getting answers, rallying together and getting to the bottom of some things. It's time for us to, I think, question ourselves.
But go ahead.
What level we really are at. We need to take assessment of where we really are and figure out where we need to go from there, because I think a lot of us are really confused about where we really are. Would you disagree with that, brother?
No. I feel you on that, but what comes to mind is that it's very difficult for a person to understand that they're not truly conscious, that, you know, you'll go up to a brother, you know, who may be thinking or seeing things a certain way, but don't have the higher levels of truth or the higher understanding to certain things. When you're walking around and you are being taught and programmed, and the things outside of you are the things that you're focusing on, there's a lot of people, brother, that are not aware of the fact that they're not conscious at all. Yeah, you are conscious. Yeah, you are rationally thinking things. Yes, you are using your intellect to move in and out of this or that. But the rational thinking and the intellect itself is not consciousness, and it's not true consciousness. Matter of fact, it is an illusion of true consciousness. So what I'm seeing amongst our people is we're in, and I'm not trying to say I'm conscious and our people aren't. I'm not trying to create that situation. What I'm trying to say, in general, we are dealing with individuals who are, and people who are unconscious of the fact that they are not conscious, and the consciousness that they perceive that they have is in no way, shape, or form the true consciousness that they can experience or that they need to experience in order for us to break this spell.
I think that's well said, and I know you got some powerful information, because we do need to have some kind of criteria by which to measure consciousness, because as you were saying, a lot of people who feel that they're conscious, they're talking about politics, and they're talking about things that society has placed an importance on, but you have a conversation with some people and they don't really understand the basic fundamentals of politics, or how this country was supposed to be set up, how it was, supposed to be a republic, and then, it turned into a democracy. And a lot of people still, to this day, really don't know the difference, or don't care. But, the basic operation between a republic and a democracy lets you know something's amiss. Something has gone awry. And, unless we question and get to the bottom of it, then we are forever going to be subject to what the plans are instead of planning for ourselves. So I know you got a lot of powerful information to bring with that, brother. But there was an article I wanted to bring to the people, if I may.
Yes, sir. And also, speaking of Hurricane Irma and Zaza Ali, because I watched that same video. I got a portion of the video she puts out that it's about 4 minutes that I think speaks to the storm and HARP and different things, and I think she does a very good job of explaining it very well. Her, the people she has in the video. So it's about 4 minutes. So when you're ready for me to put that on the people, just let me know.
Man, go ahead and kick that. Yeah, that was a powerful video, man. That was a powerful video.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring
people need to have that information.
I'm gonna bring that right now for about 4 minutes, and then I want you to go ahead and share that article that you got. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, brother.
Okay, here we go.
The documentary is called "What in the World Are They Spraying?" And it's all about the phenomenon that most people have been calling chemtrails all these years. But it's bigger than that. Yes, it's about chemtrails, but it answers the question, what is in those chemtrails? What are they spraying, and why are they doing it, and so forth. So it's really about a relatively new science called geoengineering. We found in this research that there is a science that's composed of scientists and engineers and large corporations, and to some extent even high-ranking government officials are all working together to develop a plan to change the atmosphere and the soil and the water of this earth. Now, they tell us that they're doing it because it's for the betterment of mankind, supposedly to slow down or stop global warming or control the weather to protect us against hurricanes and steer them out in the ocean or something like that. So they have some very good reasons, they say, for doing these things. But we find out that there are really some hidden agendas. It's not just all about altruism and trying to help people. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of political power to be collected, too. And even if you don't consider that aspect of the hidden agenda, you have to realize that the consequences of this are very serious. You see, they have been doing it. They've been doing it for at least 15 years, and we can show that without much question at all. While they're denying doing it, they say, well, we're thinking about doing it. Maybe we'll do it someday if we have to. And they all are saying that, well, we hope we don't have to do this because it's very drastic, and there may be some serious consequences. So I hope we don't have to do it, but we're developing the plan just in case we need to save the planet. So this is the argument. But we find out that they have been doing it, and we already know what they're spraying. They're very toxic compounds, heavy metals is what they're spraying, and we can find it in the samples of rainwater and snow water and soil at levels that are thousands of times higher than they should be, and thousands of times higher than what they were just a few years ago.
Aluminum, barium, strontium coming down on you.
Why would we not believe it's happening when what we see in the sky matches exactly the express goal of numerous geoengineering patents, about 160 or more? Why would we not believe this is happening when every element showing up in the rain tests are the primary elements named in those geoengineering patents? Why would we not believe this is happening when we have escalating levels in very short time frames, as short as 5 years? We see rain levels of aluminum, for example, escalating as much as 50,000%. California air quality studies do not show these metals migrating from China. And it's of recent origin, so, this bombardment of heavy metals that's raining down on us is coming from somewhere. Why would we not believe geoengineering is occurring when the weather patterns are so altered here in exactly the manner stated by geoengineers and reports on the consequences for geoengineering, which are diminished rainfall, which are increased ozone destruction? We have a massive ozone hole in the northern hemisphere now.
Should aluminum be in?
My name is Scott Stevens. I was a television weatherman for 20 years. These chemtrails are absolutely required to impact whatever weather event they were designing. And the trails were an absolute necessary ingredient for them to achieve their weather modification goals. So we're finding the aerosols, the metal particulates, all of those can be used and leveraged to create weather events that are several standard deviations or outside what would be typically normal. When the geoengineering really got underway with the Russians in the mid-'70s, we ended up with snow in Miami. We ended up, with frost deep into Mexico. The bizarreness of the weather really exploded on the scene when weather engineering got going in the mid-'70s.
I mean everybody.
Well, Brother Rio, I'm back. That was the information. That was the little clip that I just wanted to share. We have been talking about, them geoengineering storms, and, it really ain't too much that needs to be said about that because, we're seeing evidence of it everywhere. And I just felt like that was just a tidbit of information that people could, listen to and further understand and quit doubting one way or another. Oh, is it that they're pushing storms? Are they trying to control the weather? Let's just throw these doubts out of here. That's what they are doing, and they're doing it for a means to an end, and we need to find out a means to what end is the means, Brother Rio.
Well, let's back up on that just a little bit, brother. Because in the video, that just jogged my memory of some things that she highlighted. And if everybody could, if you can go to YouTube at some particular point in the future, and you could check out Zaza Ali and her talking about these chemtrails. I think it's a 3-parter. I was able to watch 2. Brother Tommy, I think you watched the 3rd one, so you may be able to enlighten the people on that one. But she brings forth a lot of critical information that is going to be very valuable for people. And, she's very articulate, so she states it in a way that's very easy to understand. And she gives references and sources so you can go and you can research it for yourself, and, you can go as deep into it as you like. But I believe she alluded to them working on this for over 40 years, over 40 or 50 years.
Yeah,
Can you remember?
I think it's about
if that's correct, not, Brother Thomas?
70.
70 years. Okay, they've been working for this for over 70 years. Okay, so this has been a plan. They've been perfecting it. Now they are at a point where they can, control the weather, and they can move. They can create disasters of their own. One of the effects that she goes over in the video is that, for every action there's an opposite reaction. We know that by them controlling the weather. So if they're bringing all the moisture into the United States or the southern United States, then somewhere else there's going to be an opposite reaction. So the more they use this HAARP weapon, the hotter areas are going to get on the planet, which is exactly what we're experiencing. And the audacity of these people to come up with a cover story about global warming and blaming it on what they call useless breathers is incredible. It was planned, it was thought out, and it was implemented. And they didn't blink an eye, and they still sticking to the story. That's just to highlight what kind of people we are up against and the lengths that they will go to just to deceive us. So, yeah, brother, it's very important for us to grasp hold of some tools to gain some consciousness, to be able to question our environment and things that we are seeing around us, so that we can, not be subject to all this hypocrisy, that's coming down the pipe. And if that was 70 years ago, they've already got some other stories in the pipeline that is covering up, some things that are actually taking place now, which, unless you have something to say, takes me into my article. No. You got a comment on that, brother?
No. I'm feeling you. I think we're like I said, we're transitioning into our topic, which is the opening of the way, and we're going to give tools and information so that we can remove ourselves as humanity from these control elements that are being put out here. What we can do to tap into that God consciousness so that we are no longer victims to these type of sinister plans and thoughts. These sinister plans and thoughts are able to come forth because, we have fallen and our connection to the divine has been severed, and we need to make that connection so that we now can stand up and do what we're meant to do. But yeah, go ahead and move forward, brother.
Okay. Well, this article comes from a brother named Dane Calloway, and he's got a website where he writes articles, and he touches on a lot of different subjects that are important to our community. But it's called I'm Just Here to Make You Think, and you can also find him on YouTube, and he's going deep, and he's doing some research, and he's getting access to books and information that, the average person is not going to be able to get to just because of time or just because of the money and the location that this information, is housed or, kind of watched over. But, this article is called U.S. Congress Quietly Passes a Bill Allowing Authorities to Enter Your Homes Without a Warrant. So Brother Tommy and I have been talking about, the advancement of a singular goal, whether you want to call it one world government or what have you, where they are trying to have one government, which, as we can identify now, would be the UN. Mm-hmm. So, eventually we're going to have foreign troops on the ground. You know what? Actually, Tommy, I think your article will be better to start with, the one that you were telling me about this going down in the islands.
Oh, okay. The one where prior to Irma coming to the U.S. Virgin Islands, they issued a basically an executive, well, I wouldn't say an order for the military to be able to go ahead and disarm the people and remove all the guns from the hands of the people. So this just happened in the Caribbean. The U.S. Virgin Islands has therefore declared its commitment to helping everyone get through this tough time. They did this by authorizing the Virgin Islands National Guard basically to take anything they pretty much want on the island. And they issued from the governor's office, he issued an order which instructed the military, or the adjunct general is authorized and directed to seize arms, ammunition, explosive, incendiary material, and other property that may be required by the military forces for the performance of this emergency mission in accordance with the rules of force promulgated by the Virgin Islands National Guard and approved by the Virgin Islands Department of Justice. So, you know, when they seen an emergency coming, they basically took full authority and had put out an order. And this is a United States territory or country where they informed their military to disarm the people. And this
so
order,
these people
and this brother ordered,
have no way of protecting themselves in a disaster when help is going to be limited in being able to respond to any emergencies that may occur.
That's correct.
That's incredible. Because we know in Katrina, you know, they went through after, you know, the levees, quote unquote, broke, failed, were blown up or what have you. But we know that, you know, they had people going door to door, military going door to door. They were also taking guns and ammunition and whatever else they could find. Mm-hmm. After, of course, declaring, you know, a national emergency or a national disaster. Mm-hmm. So, you know, this kind of gives you an idea of where things are going. So, again, the U.S. Congress quietly passes a bill allowing authorities to enter your homes without a warrant. And this was written on September 10th, 2017. So, you know, this is very recent.
Yeah.
Previously, I warned thousands of Americans about this happening very soon. This motion is definitely a huge red flag that millions of Americans need to know about, especially the people in the affected areas, whereas this bill is now officially the law of the land. By the way, it seems as if Snoops.com are federal government agents because they are constantly attempting to debunk this real bill that was in fact made law. Be advised, this is real. Snoops is blatantly lying. Every official source is cited by highlighted links within this article. Moving on. This bill was overwhelmingly supported by the 115th U.S. Congress and then eventually signed into law on August 22nd, 2017 by President Trump with absolutely no media coverage whatsoever for obvious reasons. According to the official government website at congress.gov, the bill is titled House Joint Resolution 76, granting the consent and approval of Congress for the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of Maryland, and the District of Columbia to enter into a compact relating to the establishment of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission. The bill's title and opening body text seems harmless and unalarming, but further details located knee-deep inside of the bill states otherwise. Mm-hmm. The text nonchalantly states, whereas the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, an interstate compact agency of the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the state of Maryland provides transportation services to millions of people each year, the safety of whom is paramount. Whereas an effective and safe Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority system is essential to the commerce and prosperity of the National Capital Region. Whereas the Tri-State Oversight Committee, created by a memorandum of understanding amongst these three jurisdictions, has provided safety oversight of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. Now, this type of proposal for a safety commission to act as a wing of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority may sound as if it's harmless and logical, when its powers includes things such as the ability to adopt, revise, and distribute a written state safety oversight program, and to even review, approve, oversee, and enforce the adoption and implementation of WMATA's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. However, the bill goes on to state, in performing its duties, the Commission, through its board and designated employees or agents, may enter upon the WMATA rail system and upon reasonable notice and a finding by the Chief Executive Officer that a need exists upon any land, waters, and premises adjacent to the WMATA rail system, including, without limitation, property owned or occupied by the federal government, for the purpose of making inspections, investigations, examinations, and testing as the Commission may deem necessary to carry out the purposes of this MSC compact, and such entry shall not be deemed a trespass. So according to this bill, which clearly violates the Fourth Amendment, grants the Commission the authority to enter property near, it does not indicate the exact yards or miles, which is very important, the Metro Rail system without limitation and without a warrant for the purpose of making inspections, investigations, examinations, and testing. Side note, the official Fourth Amendment states that all Americans' rights to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. And yet, this Fourth Amendment still stands as your constitutional right, allegedly. But I'm just here to make you think. So, to kind of unpack that, the most impacting information is, in performing its duties, the commissions, through its board and designated employees or agents, may enter upon the WMATA rail system, and upon reasonable notice and a finding by the Chief Executive Officer that a need exists upon any lands, waters, and premises adjacent to the WMAT rail system, including, without limitation, property owned or occupied by the federal government. Property owned or occupied by the federal government. Well, the federal government occupies the entire United States. Further proof of that would be if you go back to and do some research on the creation of the District of Columbia, called the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871. This is where they created the 10 by 10 radius known as the District of Columbia, where the government would have its seat of power and pass all this legislation.
City, state.
Yes, sir. What were you saying now?
No, go ahead. I'm with you.
You have something to say, bro?
No, I'm with you. I said the city, state. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to read over the whole thing, but I just want to read over a particular section. Excuse me just a second. This will be Section 6 of the District of Columbia Organic Act. And it reads, and be it further enacted that the Legislative Assembly shall have power to divide that portion of the district not included in the corporate limits of Washington or Georgetown into townships not exceeding and creation officers and prescribe the duty thereof, but all township officers shall be elected by the people and the townships respectively. So they're giving themselves jurisdiction outside of the District of Columbia, because what they actually did was that they extended the borders of the District of Columbia, and this is where you get the use of your zip codes. the use of zip codes is purely voluntary, and you can find that information in the Domestic Mail Service Regulations, Section 122.32. The use of zip codes is specifically voluntary, but they advertise to you or to me and to the majority of the people that, you know, zip codes are mandatory to put on your mail to ensure that they're going to, you know, get where they're supposed to go. But the Postal Service cannot discriminate against the non-use of zip codes, and that can be found in Postal Reorganization Act, Section 403, or Public Law 91-375. So you're not forced to use a zip code. You're doing it voluntarily, although they tell you that it's primarily mandatory. But the use of the zip code proves that you are residents of a federal district, which is going to reside in the District of Columbia. Now, if you do your homework and look up the legal definition or the U.S. Code term of what a residence is, then you will see that they claim all residences to be a subject of Congress or the government or the federal government. So this law or legislation that Donald Trump has just signed into being is really just an extension of a game that's already in play. And if people don't have an understanding of the game that's already in play, then they're going to look at that and they're not going to understand that, you know, by the wording that they use, they just given themselves jurisdiction to come into the houses of anyone located in D.C. or in California or Alaska. Mm-hmm. Anyone that falls under the federal government jurisdiction, if you're claiming to be a U.S. citizen, that would be you. They could come into your house without a warrant, without prior authorization, and they can search for anything they want. And be rest assured, whatever they find, they're going to use against you. So I just wanted the people to know and be aware of that. And it's probably going to be enacted by foreign troops. So, you know, that ploy is still out there. But I just wanted the people to be aware of that. Tommy, Brother Tommy, you got any comments on that?
No. I think he does a very good job of basically letting people know, you know, the steps that they're taking to position themselves to always have authority and power over the masses of the people. And you basically are just showing how you have a people who are believing they live in a democratic country, a home of the land of the brave and a land of the free and all that type of stuff. But when you're really showing, hey, this is a police state, they have positioned themselves to be able to control you from many different facets. And here, look, Donald Trump just recently signed something into order or into play, you know, that furthers what they've been trying to do already. So I think it just really emphasizes a lot of things that we've been saying about us living in a police state.
Well, I just want the people really to see that what you just told them and highlighted about what's going on in the Virgin Islands, that's coming here.
Yes, sir.
So they're not just running simulations and tests here. They're doing it globally. But we have to be conscious and we have to pay attention to things that are going on around the globe because they're bringing that here.
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to add that, brother. But I know you got some powerful information that you want.
Yeah, well,
that you want to get to.
Well, what I'd like to do.
You know,
go ahead, brother.
Go ahead, brother. I was just going to say if anybody had a question, comment, just go ahead and call in and you know, we'll raise your hand and we'll get to you. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you good. What I would like to do now is start moving into the topic of our discussion today, which is the opening of the way, and true consciousness is the only thing that will remove these illusions and the slavery in which is being perpetuated on mankind. It is because that we have been stripped of an overstanding of our higher self and what our higher self truly is. And not only that, we also been stripped of the understanding of the electromagnetic forces, power lines and grids that exist within nature and within the earth, that also exist within us, and how we can attune ourselves to those frequencies, to those levels of energies, and be able to raise ourselves up to an entity that is greater than just an intellectual animal, so to speak, to where we can raise up from just an animate, intelligent animal phase into the concept of godhood. One thing that I really want our people to understand is that when you go back to ancient Kemet, and they were telling us what was the key in order for us to realize or to have self-actualization, for us to be able to connect to those higher energies. When they put on the crown of when the lands were unified, Lower and Upper Kemet, they put on the crown Uraeus, the shining serpent, the shining one, shining forth. So they are letting us know that in order to raise to the higher aspect of ourself, in order to really reach that level of God consciousness or superhuman consciousness, we have to harness that energy, and it's that energy of creation, that luminous light. We have to harness that energy, allow it to travel through certain centers within our body and raise itself up through the crown, which is our connection to that light itself. And then we take on a consciousness to where we'll be able to manipulate or utilize different aspects of nature and the energy that exists within nature for our benefit. And the fact that Europeans who have come into ancient African societies, and they understand, or some of them got an understanding of that light, that illumination that our ancestors was talking about, the ability for our consciousness to be able to take on higher levels of that light that is unfolding from dark matter. And they had an understanding that through that connection, through that path of discipline, through that spiritual approach, our ancestors were able to harness a great amount of energy, which was enabled them to do great and wonderful things. So therefore, when we're looking at the changing of the guard, the Europeans pushing forward with their manifest destiny ideas and concepts, they truly understand that we have to disconnect them. We have to cut them off from that source and from that overstanding for us to be able to keep them at a base level and control them and commit genocide against them. So they are creating societies, they are creating systems that make sure that African people are not given the space nor the place to be able to have self-actualization and realization of who and what they are, nor do they get the time to be able to put forth practices and disciplines which will bring about a higher sense of connection, which will bring about a higher sense of consciousness, which will enable us to be able to stand up when we're dealing with this onslaught that is coming from this European. He is playing on the fact that we are unaware that all this external stimuli, all this stuff that he is hitting our senses with, are causing nothing but confusion. And it is preventing us from being able to go within and tap into that higher self and be able to raise ourselves from this stumper. So I want people to understand that all these things that we're seeing going on in nature, all these aspects of control that this European is coming down with, the main goal is that they understand that that dark matter, which is creation, has manifested in you as melanin, and that melanin is within certain centers of your body and within certain brain centers, which enable you and those who have that melanin in certain concentration in brain centers to be able to unfold or to raise to higher levels of consciousness or to be able to inhabit higher lights of consciousness. They know that you have the ability to do that because of the melanin that is in particular places within you, and stopping you from understanding that, developing that, tapping into that is their main purpose for control, brother. Tell me how you feel.
Wow. Well, I think you you said a whole lot in a little bit, but it was very profound. And let me tell you some observations that are everyday examples that I see your words ringing with wisdom. And one of those would be that, the most valuable substance, and I would say in the world right now, would be melanin. If you do a Google search on melanin and how much ounce of melanin would run you, I think people would be surprised at how much, that melanin is going for. But, I believe you know as well as I do that, the black market is full of, highly melanated parts, and those are the more valuable parts because of the melanin. And, the blueprint, I don't want to say superior, but, I mean, it is what it is. It's different. It's got its advantages and it's got its disadvantages. But as the blueprint and the model for other organisms around the globe, the more melanated the body is, the more advantageous it's going to be. I mean, it just is what it is. It's a gift, not of our own doing, but it just is just the earth manifesting itself and what it needs, and it put a particular substance in one of its manifestations that just happens to be highly beneficial. So, we know that a lot of fetuses are aborted, and those fetuses are used in general science. You can look up medical apartheid, and there are various other books and lectures. People lecture on those things. But yeah, I can see how our vessels are highly valued, and learning to master those vessels could lead to insight that other beings or classifications of people may not be on the same level of attaining. So they feel at a disadvantage, and they want you to be confused and distracted so you don't reach your full potential. I can fully see your points, just, with common world practices and things that are going on in the world.
Yes, sir. Brother Rio, we got a caller in queue, caller from area code 616. Give us your name and go ahead and make your comment.
My name is Zayo, also known as Brother Davis. You brothers are tapping on something that goes a whole lot deeper. Mm-hmm. So let me just move a little quicker here. There's a program right now on responsible technology called GMOs Revealed. They are literally altering your body on a micro level. The microbials in your system are being attacked by glyphosate, which is in every aspect of consumption, whether it be water or food, and especially processed food. Mm-hmm. So we have to accept the fact that a lot of people would not make it through this. One. Two, in order to reach those levels of spiritual enlightenment in which you talked about, which is called the glorious life, mm-hmm. we all have it. It's just that we don't know how to tap into it, because literally you're right about them stealing the secrets out of the great libraries of Egypt. The sad part about it is that they only know what our potential is. They don't know how to stop it, but they know how to put things in the way. That's why they dump so much of their waste in our minds, and therefore we cannot find our way back to ourselves. And the reason why is because you look at perfect example is the most powerful tool they got is TV. Everything on it is based on fear. So that fear transcends the emotions. Those people don't realize that one of the main things that you have to do in order to control your ability to maintain a level of melanin control is to control your emotions. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because people make decisions out of emotion that really have nothing to do with their best interests. And that speaks for humanity in itself. Two, we have been bombarded with foods that disrupt our ability to control the valve, the channels and the meridians in our bodies. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we've started consuming what they eat. We're not them. And I keep repeating that 1,000 times. So when we eat what they eat, it has a different effect on us. Perfect example, high blood pressure, heart disease. You know why it's rampant in the black community? Because they literally are putting stuff in our food that they're giving us no clue about. And the sad part about it is that people are just starting to learn to do something simple like read labels. They're going to say, okay, well, I can't understand the word. Then that's where your due diligence comes in, because you're going to feed this stuff to your family. We also have to understand that it requires us to do some leg work. What is the leg work? We're going to have to get into states of meditation, and when we get into those states of meditation, we have to meditate on the things that are going to uplift us. I started with the 42 principles of Ma'at in my dumping process. And when I say dumping, I got away from all the TVs and all of that other crap that was putting images in your mind that you have no control over, nor know who they are that made the images, and that transcends your own personal remembrances. You think back about the things that you did when you was a child, you could remember those easy. But when you think beyond that, you could become bombarded with all the images that TV has already transplanted in your mindset over the years.
Yes,
so
sir.
That has to be dumped to a degree, at least until you can control the process of being able to take back your body. You have to get away from all meats. The reason why I say all meats is because it's chemically rich. And the sad part about it is that a lot of people will fight you behind just that comment alone, but they fail to realize you'll never reach your true potential when you're bombarding yourself with the same toxins that literally are destroying your body's ability to reach a level of transmission that you need to reach. And the sad part about it is people fail to realize that food, body function, and sun are actually one continuous cycle of operation. Mm-hmm. And if you don't put the right stuff in, you get the wrong stuff out. Another thing is they're starting to block the sun. I don't know if you know this, but they're starting to bake clouds that will block the sun. They understand that we are at a stage of transformation, but a lot of people have no idea where they are. So therefore, they don't know how to do due diligence to find out what they would need to open that door to have a greater understanding of what they need to apply to their life in order to lift themselves to another level. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people already think they're conscious. Look at the Christian community. Look at the Muslim community. And the sad part about it is I know people are going to say, well, you're targeting religions. Well, they were designed to keep you from being able to elevate to areas in which you could be constructive. If Egypt had a lifestyle that lasts them 6,000 years, without many major disruptions, and literally have accomplished all of the things that they're doing now. Mm-hmm. Yet, they were destroyed. The reason why they were destroyed comes from a lot of plethora of concepts. But since you want to open this door, I'm going to take you to the next level. The next level is we are being terraformed. Those of you who don't know, that means that they are really regenerating us on the most micro level. Not only us, but our environment, our water, the weather. Everything is under attack. Mm-hmm. And don't take my word for it. Do your due diligence. You'll find that the people who are doing this here have literally put themselves in a position to control based on their laws. It has nothing to do with the law of the land. And we have sacrificed our birthright behind the fact that we have allowed them to reach this point. But we are not dead. And let me repeat that. We are not dead, but we're dying unless we do the things that are necessary to save ourselves. And the first thing we got to do is get away from their food and their water. And the sad part about it is that a lot of people are thinking, well, how can I do that? Well, everybody has to find a path. Your path has to be designed to be fitting for you. And the sad part about it is that regardless of where you go nowadays, most of the water has chemicals in it. So you're going to have to find some fresh resources that you couldn't have available to you before. One of the things that I did in my house and my family is we bought a farm in order for us to be able to control those things, our food, our water. You see what I'm saying? Because literally that gives us a hand up to be also a hand out. Because we're going to also try to establish this to help other people who have elevated themselves to a level to understand the worthiness of the cause and have reached a point of trustworthiness. Because not everybody can be welcomed in. Last thing I want you to understand is this. We are not alone. This ain't being done. This is being done for a specific purpose. And the purpose it's being done for is not human, because they're changing everything that humans require for a quality of life. We got to wake up. This ain't about the old the white people against black people. This is far beyond that. But the reason being is because the same beings that were trying to do this during the early times of Egypt could not, because the Egyptians possessed the knowledge to do exactly about some of the things you're talking about. Most black people can't even think about achieving the impossible. So if you can't think about it, how will you ever achieve it? We got a lot of work to do, brothers. You guys opened the door, but if you just want some keys, you got some, because guess what? Our work is never going to be done. The reason why it's never going to be done is because even after we get the numbers of people that we will need to collate our resources into one energy force, we still have to deal with the excess that they bring with them. And say a bad part. If you think that this is going to be easy, it's not. Because everything that you ever seen that was negative in your life is transplanted in your memory system. So you have to go in there, and I'm in the process of doing it every day. It's not something that happens overnight. Believe me, when I think about the things that I've been through as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, all of these memories are there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are not the best tools for us to have. So we have to learn to meditate on the knowledge that is going to be purposeful in the past that's before us. So I can't make it any clearer than that, brothers. Other than that, I mean, we'd have to have classes because we're trying to set some teachings up right now that are going to help people grow beyond their circumstance. Matter of fact, I was doing the show on Black Talk on Wednesday nights, Wise Wednesday, in which I was taking them from the lowest level of understanding that they have a right to control their lives, to teaching them how to feed themselves, how to meditate, how to start to put the right things in and dump the wrong stuff. But all you can do is put the lesson out there. If they're not operating in it, then it really doesn't do them any good. But see, I serve a greater purpose. So therefore, all I can do is the best I can. But the work that I do behind the scenes, it serves a greater purpose for me in the immediate cause. But you brothers are on the right path.
Yes, sir. But
I'm going to tell you something. Do not get discouraged. And I can't emphasize that enough. Because our people are so emotional now. Look at what they watch on TV. They have parties around empire and power and scandal. Well, none of that stuff are going to be tools in the fight that we have ahead of us. And it's really not a fight. The reason why it's not a fight is because they're putting all of that in our people to keep our people off the course of finding the way. And the sad part about it is that they got a whole lot more media systems working for them than we have and what we are doing right now. But this is a tool, and I try to utilize it with the greatest of skill that I possibly can. Yes, so I welcome all people and all help, because the task is great, but the accomplishment is even greater. I just wanted to add to y'all's show, brother. This is Brother Davis, man. Okay. Check me out on Wise Wednesdays. I do the same thing you're doing on another level. Also, check out Responsible Technology. GMOs Revealed is the next level. It's 9 programs. And I'm telling you, prepare yourself, because you are going to find out that they are literally putting stuff in us that is altering the microbial structure of our physical body, and they're doing it for a reason. And those people who are not smart enough to do their own due diligence, it's being perpetuated because guess what? They're eating fast foods, they're grabbing the steaks and all of that there. They're watching the NFL and all these other things to keep their mind off what they should be doing. So
yes, sir. Yes.
I appreciate the opportunity, brother.
Yes, sir, Brother Davis, and I'm feeling you 100%, and that's what we're really on the same wavelength, because that's what me and Brother Mario now are about to discuss in terms of how do we block out all this noise and be able to go within inside and to start to tap into those energies that we can now start using for our benefit. Brother Rio, we got to go to a quick break. And then after we come out of this break, I'm going to start sharing some information out of this book, The Opening of the Way. And we're going to go ahead and move forward. You're listening to the Melanated Roots Radio Show. We'll be right back after this message.
You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com. The views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to the Melanated Roots Radio Show, brought to you by Black Talk Radio Network. And we are discussing the opening of the way. True consciousness is the only thing that will remove the illusion. Brother Rio, I was about to start getting into some of the information we have to present to the people. Is there something you have to say before we move forward? Especially since Brother Davis came on and basically, took the concept to the moon. If you got something you want to throw in there, go ahead and put it in there before we move forward.
I mean, he left a lot that could be elaborated on, but, he dropped a lot of wise words. But I think it'll come out as we continue to go over the information. So, let's go ahead and get to it, brother.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start, like I said, in The Opening of the Way. It's a practical guide to the wisdom teaching of ancient Egypt, by Isha Swaller de Lubix. Modern man is the product of several centuries of cerebral culture. He has taught himself so much that he imagines he can progress unaided, simply regarding evolution as the logical development and mutual adaptation of cells, organs, and faculties. This state of mind professes to explain the universe and man by reason and reason only, without supposing there to be any creative cause. It has, of course, strengthened the notion of free will, for if man has no other cause to consider beyond himself, if he is supreme in nature and the rational faculty supreme in man, then obviously he cannot admit the existence of any natural laws or forces other than those which his reasoning faculty can analyze. And this faculty seems to him to exist as a logical means of subjecting natural forces to his control. Let me throw a little caveat in here. See, what we're going to speak about is how the intellectualization of man, the rational thinking of man, inclusive of men and women, thinking that his intellectual capacity is what's going to enable him to properly guide himself within this experience or within this order. That's where the mistake is being made, because we have to make decisions from the spirit and the heart, not from the intellectual rationalization of our minds. Okay. All right, Brother Rio. But science, oriented thus to the increase of material comfort, has created new needs, and these in turn have developed in man a keen sense of envy and a terrible sense of haste. The envy has become a social malady, and the sense of haste is so tyrannical that much thought is spent on trying to satisfy the need for it. Hence, the feverish search for anything which will indulge the senses and the emotions until the end and emotional stimulus is valued only for its violence. But whether the effect of its indulgence is good or harmful, nobody cares. Rio, it's simple enough to arouse one's physical appetites, but not easy to control them. Nerves trained to excitement feel an unhealthy craving for it. When the life of brain and senses has been accustomed to be fed continually from without by an unending flow of secondhand thoughts and images, of catchy tunes and twitchy rhythms. It calls for these things because they render individual effort superfluous and shake to pieces any notion of real values. That is our modern world dancing the infernal roundelay of haste, ever more deeply involved in the quest for variety and novelty. A mind trained to these frantic gymnastics will clearly show two characteristics. It will be insatiable, always preferring quantity to quality, and it will suffer from the need for speed. The quantitative mentality has done much already to transform the social pattern, producing a loss of interest in quality. And the need for speed has been transforming the lives of humanity. But the worst effect of all, these new impulses has been the nervous imbalance which cannot tolerate silence or inactivity. These two pillars of meditation, without which one can have no true intuition or spiritual experience. It may be objected that many inspirations, inventions, and even spiritual conversions have happened suddenly, without any preceding meditation. But the objection is unfounded because, however sudden a flash of intuition, it can only be perceived by one in a receptive state. That is, one capable of catching the moment of inspiration and allowing it to gestate in attentive silence. It is not difficult to show that this condition of readiness, which is stillness of the nerves and brain and heart, is hardly compatible with an appetite that is impatient, which in modern man is exaggerated into an imperious need of the nerves and the senses. What you got? How you feeling about that, Brother Rio?
Wow, that was profound, brother. That was profound.
Okay.
That was a whole lot too. But to unpack a little bit of that, what I was hearing, one was, don't keep up with the Joneses. Let the Jones be the Joneses, and I'm gonna be Brother Rio, and the Brother Rio clan. We're gonna do what we gonna do. So we ain't gonna worry about what the Joneses got, and just cause they got a new car, don't mean we got to get a new car. Cause I'll prop mine up and work on it until it's running in a heartbeat, cause there ain't no payments on it. So, I hear what you're saying, about the materialism and being distracted by the materialism, which I think is the more important lesson. So it's not that, everybody want to have nice things. You want to live with a certain level of comfort, and, we have to recognize that society has perverted comfort into, as you say, the need for speed. So we want everything now, and it's even become a part of the courtship. This is how you court somebody. You buy them flowers. You got to take them out to dinner. You got to take them out to the movies. You got to take them out to the club, out for drinks, out for coffee. Woo-de-woo, XYZ. You got to buy them little gifts of appreciation and things of that nature. You're showering them with materialism instead of actually making a true connection with the person and seeing if, we can tolerate each other in good times and bad times, and, how do you operate under stress, and can we function together when we're both under stress, and we can't, seem to find a way out of, what we perceive is a position of lack. Our mentality and what we bring into the table as far as how we are looking at a situation goes a far away. Because you looking at me like, or you a lazy bum, you can't do this, you can't do that, but you ain't taking into account that the society is set up for me not to be able to advance without, selling my soul or selling out, then, how we really going to relate to each other? And the same thing with the man, and his objectivity of a woman, because that's just what he's coming up with. Because in this society, that's one of the things that we've been able to hold on to is, our sexual prowess and ability to conquest, and things of that nature. So, yeah, I feel what you're saying with the materialistic aspect of it and how it is distracting us from going inward and being able to raise our inner levels up to a certain point, so we know how to deal with each other on a divine level. So I feel you on that, brother. Is there anything else you wanted to bring out?
Yeah, I was just
from your reading.
Yeah. Oh, I got a lot more. I got a lot more information that I want to bring out. I was just giving you an opportunity to make your comment in terms of it. But yeah, I got a lot of more information that I want to share. Okay. Here's another thing I want to read. First, we deny the but what you're saying, the constant distractions that are being put in our path, that's the issue that we're dealing with. And first, we deny the constant intervention of the creative word, in as much as the modern mind discovers as much first cause as it requires in the activity of our cells, their faculties, and their logical progress towards mutual adaptation. Second, spiritual inspiration and animation are denied, in as much as the acceptance of this ideal will reduce the scope of pure reason and deprive it of the virtue of being self-created. Third, there's a denial of the harmonious relationship of all parts of our universe, for the understanding of this is not to be reached by intellectual search alone, but only by the path of silence and true meditation. Development of man's mental faculties is the characteristic task of the West, but it has been misdirected, making a means into an end. And the intensive development of these faculties in the latest stage of our evolution have given us nowadays a distorted notion of the extent of our human powers. She's talking about the development of the mental faculties. It's given us a distorted view. Rational information has usurped the throne of knowledge and has declared valueless the heritage of ancient wisdom, which might cause it to lose its throne. The learned rationalist wants above all things to avoid encountering where doubt and knowledge meet, the one power which could limit his own, a divine power which he could neither analyze nor check. And our learned man is in some danger of meeting this divine power, the spirit, as he might properly call it, within himself. For that which incarnated at his birth received the impression of a spiritual impulse, which has a universal significance, though colored by his individual nature. Had his understanding been aroused so as to develop the first spiritual impulse, he would have been able to prevent his analytical reasoning faculty from acting like an angel of death to prevent the birth of his divine self from the depths of the primal paradise. So what I think is very important is what we're speaking there is that European culture is advancing the idea of rationalization and the intellect, and fooling man himself with the ideas that these things are supreme, and that when it comes to development of our species, that these aspects of it are what is the development of it, intelligence. But our ancestors said that is not the way to go about that. The intelligence and the rational mind and the use of the mind, especially when it is being given certain stimuli, will lead you astray. That one has to go within inside oneself in spaces of quietness, in meditative spaces, so that one can listen to the inner spirituality, the inner heart, the spirit of the inner blood, and it guiding one in a proper manner, as opposed to rationalizing and intellectualizing things. Therefore, society gets to move in this patriarchal direction when we are allowing the intellectual or the intellectualizing of concepts to occur as opposed to going within. Do you feel me on that, Brother Rio?
I do. And the only thing I would add is that because you're making a good point, to get more background and a reference to understand the framework in which you're speaking, the people can go and they can, study and research, the Europeans' history on what they call the Age of Reason and the Age of Enlightenment. Because if you study that particular time period, Thoreau and all those famous philosophers and poets that they hype up during that time period, they will tell you themselves the purpose of the Age of Reason and Enlightenment was to discredit the ancient philosophies and ways of thinking and the ways of doing things for a new way of reasoning and thinking, which was modeled on the ancient philosophies and teachings, but it's just coming from new people.
Right.
And they're changing it up, and they're changing the agenda, and they're letting everybody know that, and they're switching up the methods in which they are talking about these ancient achievements, and they're labeling it science.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't want to destroy the flow because I know you got a lot more information and it's really powerful, but, that's where people can go to get, more of a backdrop and understand the contrast of what we're saying between, what the ancients would have for us and the way that we did things and how they kind of flipped the script and took control and started disseminating, their propaganda globally and in different genres. Go ahead, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And to speak even further about how we have to be careful of the intellectualizing and rationalizing, it says, if they are disposed to receive it, the spark of truth does give a moment of inspiration to those it touches. But they must then go through the same experience as happens after birth. If the spark is received and brooded over by the immortal being incarnate in the body, then it causes him to grow and increase his power. But if it is only received by the faculty of rational judgment, then the intellect will seize upon it and alter it to its own advantage, according to its preconceptions. And this intellect, acting as usual like an angel of separation, arranges its arbitrary code of good and evil so as to further its own control. This interference by the reasoning faculty results in sterility. Total awareness can no longer develop. Like a piece of earth deprived of its natural fertilizer, the rationalist receives no other nourishment than the arguments handed out by his intellect. So if we talk to these people, Brother Rio, who are bringing a lot of this death and destruction to the world, I guarantee you they will try to intellectualize their reasoning for why they believe it to be something that should be present. What do you think?
I would agree with you because, what you read, it sounds like, the rise of ego. And, it can manifest itself in different ways. But, one being what we already talked about, the audacity of of some people to have a plan that they know is going to raise the temperature of the earth, but to cover it up, they're going to blame it on the very people that they're oppressing. I mean, how much ego can you have, for domination and for control and for power? But, it also manifests itself in different ways. Like, some men in our community have too much manhood. That's what we call it, sometimes in the fraternity. You got too much manhood. So, they got too much machismo, they got too much machoism, and, they want to be, quote unquote, the alpha male. They got to be dominant in everything. And if they're not, then, somebody's trying to get over on them. But, we're missing the primary lesson of balance. We gotta have balance with anything that we do. And like you were saying, going within and removing that emotion can help us balance things out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, and that's what I'm trying to also bring to the stage, Brother Rio, how these sensory things that we are dealing with our five senses, and how our sensories are being overloaded in us paying attention to the outwardly things and cultivating those outwardly things is causing man to be in the position to where he is just easily manipulated and taken advantage of. We have to turn within. So I'm gonna go further on some information that I highlighted. It said the trouble came from man's desire to possess, wield, and know by means of his brain and senses all the powers that he knew in himself before being separated from it. This is why the gospel declares that to enter the kingdom of heaven, one must become as a little child. That is, must let the mind obey the impulses which come from the heart and spirit. All the great messengers of spirit and the masters of mysticism have declared with one voice the supreme aim of humanity is reunion with its divine principle. As means to this end, they all mention simplicity of heart and mind as the abolition of hatred, violence, and vengeance, even when these things are given the pretext of rectifying the human consciousness. So, even Lao Tzu defines wisdom as complete willingness to be the plaything of chance circumstances. This, says he, is why the sage is able to accomplish great designs of non-activity. And these great designs of non-activity are the will of our Father in heaven, whose will must be done on earth as in heaven. So unless ye be, as it says, unless ye become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven, said the Christ. So the mind of the man of established virtue may be compared to that of a newborn child. And so that's what we're speaking of quit intellectualizing, rationalizing, letting certain exterior faculties control the spirit or the individual, when the individual is supposed to be guided by his spirit and his heart. So if you look at European rule and the changing of the guard from the matriarchy to the patriarchy and that external dominance, and if you look at going externally without and intellectualizing and coming from a people that went within to create the world around them, can you see why things are so difficult for our people in terms of self-determining and rationalizing and moving themselves towards purpose on this earth, Brother Rio?
Brother, since you opened the door, I'm going to go ahead and walk through it. I think that let me preface it by this. I believe that there is a difference between education and learning. Several times I've heard you speak the words, through experience. You go within and, you go over your experiences, because man learns by doing. You can read all the books you want to, but until you go out and experience it, you have interaction with it, you develop some feelings and some kind of sensations that you can go and meditate on, then what are you really learning? You're not learning anything, and when we're taught that we need the American dream. You go to school, you get a good education, you go get a job, and XYZ. You know what I'm saying? But that education ain't nothing but just training. Because if you take economics, for example, you go and you learn about supply and demand and currency, which they call money, and XYZ. But once you really get into the know, you understand that it's just a game. And supply and demand don't matter for anything. It's all manipulated from the people at the top. But until you experience that, and now you come back and meditate on that, you really don't know anything because you have no experience in it. So, I think it's very valuable to come back to that quiet place and you dwell upon your experiences. But in that same breath, you have to be in a place to where you are willing to go out and gain those experiences. You have to be more reliant upon yourself. And I feel that within our community, we have given up too much responsibility to other people to enact things for us and instead of owning that responsibility and working to get it ourselves and partnering with people who look like us, act like us, and are internally trying to cultivate like we should be cultivating together within a community and working together to solve our own solutions. What do you think about that, brother?
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. That's the direction in which we're trying to roll.
And the only way I see, that possible is, like you said, to grow in consciousness. But the way that we are enacting it and trying to parade like we are that, I don't believe is very effective. And the proof is in the pudding, because the state that we're in, we don't have any unity. We don't have any unity at all. And we're very distrusting of each other. So, if we're distrusting of each other, then obviously you don't have any faith that the next man is trying to internally cultivate himself and rise up. What do they always teach you? Keep your eyes open. Look around. Be aware of your surroundings. Know who you at. Know who's coming at you. You know, somebody bumping up against you, you got to feel your pocket, see if your wallet's gone. You know, in that mistrustful atmosphere, how you going to be able to unify and join with people and come up with common solutions?
I agree, and that's what, you know, what we're talking about is being able to, you can, once we establish that connection and we know that brothers and sisters are going inside and you have a conscious community of people who are doing that now, you know you have a basis in which you can come together and people you can trust and a foundation from which you can grow upon. Okay, now check this out, Brother Rio. Okay, equally the flesh.
Well, let me say something about that real quick though, because like you're saying, you know, it's one thing to have it, but if I see you practicing it, if I see you working on it daily, even if you do fall or come short or you have a transgression against me, I can see what you're doing on a daily basis. I can tell where your heart is. You're trying to do good. So it's easy for me to forgive your trespass because I know what you're striving for. I know what you're working towards. You just fell down. You're going to get back up. We're going to get back together, and now we're going to keep stepping. It's easier for us to forgive and mend that relationship because we see each other practicing it daily. I just wanted to add that, brother.
Yeah, okay. Yes, sir, and that's a very good point that you're making because that's what applying a spiritual discipline to one's life, that will be able to create that ability for us to come together and get away from, like you said, being leery of each other because we understand that each and every one of us is doing the work. I want to share this information right here. It says, equally, the flesh of a fruit must be distinguished from its kernel, and the mass of humanity from the elite who can become its growing point. The latter are the chosen in that they are prepared to develop themselves to the superhuman state. They are called to the reconstruction of the conscious cosmic man, each one being a cell of his own body. Among the chosen, there are two categories. First are those who are no longer entirely satisfied by the explanations of Western dogma and yet are still deeply attached to certain religious observances. Also, second, there are those who feel an imperious need to seek the light outside of dogmatic prohibitions and ritual obligations. But if you wish to find deliverance and create in yourself the conditions of eternal life, you should give up doctrinal obligations whenever they interfere with the freedom of your quest. What that say to you, Brother Real?
Get up out them dead-head religions.
Buddhism teaches very rightly that ignorance is an obstacle to deliverance, and ignorance includes wrong beliefs which prevent individual experience by means of rigid doctrines or intellectual and moral restriction. Nothing encourages self-amorality more than the excuse of blind belief and the certainty of pardon, especially when one need not even sincerely fulfill the conditions for obtaining the pardon. The ideas of fault, sin, condemnation, and pardon have only a very relative value unless we look at the reality behind them. Faults committed against an established convention are a matter for the community or the social order. But as regards real sins, what man can judge the sins of another when he's not able to read his conscience and see his real motives? The evil which makes a man a sinner in reality resides not in the act itself, but in offending against one's own conviction. The lack of convictions, that is, of vigilant consciousness, is a state not of innocence, but a state of stupidity in which a man loses both his sense of responsibility and his feeling for human experience. Equally, blind submission to denominational authority is an excuse for killing the sense of responsibility and prevents the growth of discernment. For one only learns by what one suffers in one's own person and experiences within oneself. He who would realize his superhuman unity must leave the herd and set out alone to explore his own self and through himself the universe. What's that saying to you, Brother Rio?
Know thyself. Know thyself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's what I said, bro. I mean, you dropping. Come on, keep bringing.
Okay.
Keep bringing. We got any callers in queue?
I We have a wireless caller. No, the wireless caller muted itself. Right now, no, nobody's in queue, so I'm gonna keep bringing a little more information.
All right. Get the number out real quick, brother.
Okay. The number is 866-510-9025, and hit **, and that will let us know that you're there, and you can go ahead and make your comment. Okay, now, Brother Rio, modern science admits that energy can exist in different states, some more degraded than others. So too should man try to recognize in himself those states of subtle energy which are his immortal element. If he knows nothing of them, he lowers himself to the conditions of an intelligent animal and attributes to his brain phenomena which really depend on his higher faculties. But if he learns to recognize them, he becomes aware of his immortal self and attains the privileges of a realm superior to that of animal man. In this work, the animal man, with the intellectual faculties depend on his mortal brain, is called the automaton, or the automatic self. In order to keep it functioning harmoniously, the first requisite is a knowledge of the laws which govern it. So, one thing that I also wanted to point out to people, Brother Rio, also is that you have the different aspects of yourself. One that is wanting to keep you away from the light, which we know as the ego, and then we also have that higher aspect of ourself that has the will to the light. So, I would like to clarify that, because a human being can aspire to a higher state. Shows him to be dissatisfied with our present state. You get that? If we want to aspire to something higher, we're not satisfied with the present state. And such dissatisfaction reveals latent within man a form of consciousness other than mere animal consciousness. But whether a man ignores this opportunity to progress or tries to follow it up, and whether or not he succeeds, it does demonstrate the existence of two divergent wills, corresponding to two different levels of being. One level is that the animal man, which I shall call the automaton because it depends on the interplay of the physical, mental, and emotional constituents. The other shows a higher and more subtle awareness than that of the automaton. The two wills may be called the personal will and the will to light. When the will to the light begins to make itself felt, there follows inevitably a struggle with the personal will, because two have different objectives and, even more important, do not understand one another. Harmony can only be established if they can be brought to agree, and this requires self-knowledge. What you think about that, brother?
I'm in full agreement. We got about 15 minutes. Is there any last thing you want to bring in? I don't want to go in too deep because I know you got some, you have a lot of jewels to drop. Yeah. Let me share some other information with the people. But then again, I'm just only going to hit a little bit more information, but I definitely think what you have to say is what we really, our discussion amongst ourselves and our audience is what really brings on some heavy information. So let me share this. Because, go ahead. Because let me share this because my overall goal is to show how we're going to have to come away from all these external things and go into the internal aspects of cultivation. And we have to understand the energy that is given off by the earth in terms of, we know that energy or creation is moving in a spiral pattern, in an upward spiral pattern, and you have that type of energy coming from the core of the earth up through its energy grid lines, and we are able to connect with that through certain meridians in our body, and we should be able to corral that consciousness and that light and be able to enlighten or illuminate ourselves or become the shining serpent. And then we can experience consciousness that will not allow us to find ourselves in this situation. So that's what, yes, sir. That's what the whole aim is. I know that's what you was wanting to get to. Yeah. Go ahead and drop it, brother. Okay, so the innate consciousness, creator of all kingdoms of nature, becomes in the animal kingdom
the instinctual consciousness. But in man, it is dormant because of his artificial education, which concentrates his attention on the evidence of his senses and his reasoning faculty. What he commonly calls consciousness is his brain consciousness, which is only a mirror reflecting thoughts and inferences whose origin and reality he cannot clearly discern. Based on they are on chance association of ideas, impressions, and emotions. Excuse me. Brain consciousness, in other words, is only a mental projection of what a man believes himself to be, of what he believes himself to want and do. But it effectually rules him because he does not know what influences from within and without determine it, and with it his behavior. And also because brain consciousness has no more contact with real consciousness than have two radio stations working on different wavelengths. Without experimental knowledge of his different states of consciousness, a man is controlled by his impulses, and then his free will is an illusion. And this illusion can be tragic because it can make any human being, however intelligent, an irresponsible puppet so far as his destiny is concerned. The error that it induces are so disastrous that it is the first obstacle to be cleared out of the way if he wishes to find the real aim of his existence and not to die entirely. At the moment of birth, the consciousness of a human individual includes the consciousness acquired during earlier experiences, grafted onto the human racial consciousness, which already includes the various forms of consciousness involved in nature. This oversimplified explanation gives no idea of the states of consciousness of our real immortal selves. But through addressed only to the brain, it may serve to reduce the resistance of our rationalizing intelligence by showing it how to observe as a spectator the acquisition of a kind of knowledge which goes beyond it. A trick is the question. Yes, no doubt. But a trick which can impose an armistice on the combativeness of our reason, so that in the ensuing silence we may hear the call of our own anxiety and seek the means to awaken our real consciousness. So, Brother Rio, that's really where I keep going back to, we have to develop this inner consciousness. There was a reason why the Uraeus had the importance it had in our ancient societies. There was a reason for the understanding of the manner in which energy moves and in which it push and forms energy, in relation to the way our body is in our cells and everything is generating and moving with energy. That's what we're going to have to reconnect with, Brother Rio, to break this cycle we're on. And one other example that I would like to use, if you look at the Haitian Revolution and you read about our brothers and sisters getting this formidable French opponent out of there, or oppressor out of there, they tell you the story of them conjuring up the spirit through their voodoo practice and being able to create that energy, which made a lot of them indestructible. They was able to go out there and handle their business. So we have seen the application of energy from a spiritual standpoint, if we just look at that alone and the power that it will enable us to have. And obviously, when our ancestors united the two lands, or the united spirit with matter, they were speaking about the rising up of that energy, the coiling of that energy, the spiraling growth of that energy. Being able to tap into that energy is what enabled us to do the great things that we've done throughout times immemorial. Go ahead, my brother.
Well, brother, I just have a question of clarification, because, and I know you know the answer, but can you explain to me? Because when I hear you saying that, it sounds to me like you're using, to use another term that you're talking about, Kundalini. Can you explain the difference between the Kundalini and what you're talking about, or are are they related, or What information?
Yes, sir, brother Real. It's one and the same. You're basically looking at African or Kemetic spirituality, saying moving into India, and we know that we had an ancient great society, the Indus Kush Valley, and that same information flourished there as well. So when you're looking at from the Indian perspective, the raising of the Kundalini energy, that is the same thing, the same concept that came from the Nile Valley. But like I said, our ancestors referred to it as the Uraeus, and the illumination of that was the shining serpent. So you're dealing with this same energy in other cultures of Chi and Ida and Pangala. So you're dealing with the same concept that was originally amongst our people in the Nile Valley. And you know what? I'm sure there's a lot of brothers that say that, this knowledge and information was with our people prior to the coming of the Nile Valley as well. So, same thing, but it's in recognition of we have to raise in energy and in spirit to truly become that eternal Christ-like being that we know exists within all of us.
And another thing I just wanted to point out for the family was that the things that you were talking about, the joint lands, the raising of the snake, the urea, is we can see evidence of the Europeans, the Tammuz, taking that ancient knowledge and putting it into practice today, not informing us that they're using our ancient information, our ancient knowledge and technology, and they're putting it right in our face. And proof of that is what they call the conducis, or the medical symbol, where you have the snakes going around the pole. And, you see it on a lot of ambulances or hospitals or doctor facilities. But, that symbol is explaining the exact same thing that you're talking of, but we're not taught that. So but they understand that, and they're using that energy and that power. So, they're taking advantage of the consciousness that we had in the past, using it for their own purposes, as well as hiding the fact from us after they forced us to forget it through generations of enslavement and genocide and other atrocities. Would you feel that's an accurate statement, brother?
Yeah. I feel that's very accurate. And not only, and to add on to what you're saying, they have an understanding of the greatness. If you read the books, even the books that are written in Arabic by the Arabic writers, Ibn Khaldun, and other writers throughout history, they seen the greatness of the accomplishment when they came into our ancient lands. They speak of it in many different books, and I can just go down the list of them, one after another, and the different civilizations that they uncovered. So, and they'd seen the monuments and the temples that we built. They knew that we understood energy and the harnessing of energy, and that we place temples and monuments in certain places in certain ways so that we can harness that energy. So they understood what it is that was making us great, what it is that was enabling us to be, for them to be in so much awe of us when they first come in contact. They understood what the priest class knew and the magical things that they could do. So they clearly knew that the preventing us from being able to tap into those type of things and understand that the intercultivation is the way for us to become what it is that we're looking to become. They know it. So pulling you away from it, throwing these monotheistic religions on you, getting you to believe in things outside of yourself. Just think of the concept of Christ being outside of oneself and everybody looking outside of oneself. That is the easy way to control humanity, to control the minds of the masses, because they're not, garnering up their own strength, their own ability to be self-determining. They're just following the herd. So pulling us away from that path was a serious tool that they had to use. And we have to reconnect back to that. Just like we're talking about the book 2,000 Seasons by I.E. Quiyamar. He's talking about the way, how we have to get back to the way. And that is the way, raising and rising ourselves up in terms of connection with that energy so that we can reinform ourselves and bring forth a culture that allows us to flourish in that manner. That is the way, and that's the way they're trying to prevent us from going, brother.
Well, very well said, brother. Only thing I would like to, interject is that, when you think about Islam, which has been, taken over by the Arabs, as well as, Christianity being forced upon us by the Europeans with certain political agendas, because, we know back in the day that the way that they came to power was through the sword and through violence and, subjugation. So I think it would stand to reason that people with these types of agendas are not really interested in raising you up to a conscious potential to where you will no longer need them and you will be self-determined and, you can figure out things for yourself. But I wanted to you to close it out on something that we had discussed when we were talking about how our ancestors practiced these principles and they were able to unify and be able to get along with each other to the point to where they could manifest all of these things that we can't duplicate today, and are still confused on how they were able to do it. Whereas now, under this oppressive system and the people who are in power now, how they constantly seem to be at war and the effects you think that are having on us. Mm-hmm. Can you drop on that, brother?
Come with that again.
I wanted you to kind of compare and contrast how the ancients and their cultivation of the inner self and how they were able to unify and achieve, great feats of architecture and mathematics and things of different natures that we still can't replicate today. But in this state of oppression that we're in right now, we are being oppressed by a person who is always at war and being so divisive. And, I was wondering if you wanted to speak to the influence or the effect that it's having on us today.
Yes, sir.
In terms of consciousness and being able to unify.
Yes, sir. I agree. Me and you have talked about it all the time, and I said this specifically to you, that a lot of times when we're raising our children, we tell them all these things that we want them to be, but we have to understand that it is more important to set the environment for them to become it. I can't tell my children I want you to be this and be that, but I don't have an environment that is conducive to becoming those things. So when you have a warmonger around you, someone who's always destabilizing the situation, someone who is outwardly and physical, he puts pressure on those around him through his violence and his negative ways and in external ways, and forces them to now move in that mode because of defense of oneself from him. And through now being externalized and physical, it prevents one from being able to have that time of serene, that time of equipoise, that place of peace where one can contemplate the higher sides of life, the higher sides of himself, higher levels of consciousness, and to be able to bring forth a world which resides on that. So being in this space with an enemy or someone who is so physical and aggressive and destabilizing prevents that unification, that oneness. A lot of these brothers living in inner city areas, front yard and backyard, don't even have no grass, ain't been out into the country, haven't been fishing, ain't been hiking, ain't been out doing certain things in nature. It's the totally pulling people away from the path, and being around them and in their presence prevents us from even being able to come together because they got us on a 30-day economic cycle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see, brother.
Well, I think that was a powerful show, and some powerful information was definitely brought forth. So I think it's one people are going to have to keep referring back to, and there are definitely a lot of nuggets, that can be grasped and researched and be expounded upon. So we'll be back here next Monday, and we're going to do it all again. Thank you to Brother Davis for contributing to the show with your very powerful and wise words, and to the rest of the listening audience, out there, you can participate at any time, but we appreciate your listenership as well, and we'll be here next week.
Oh yeah, and before
be safe and go ahead, brother.
And before we go, Brother Rio, I want to share just a quick little proverb. It's from the selections from the Hosea, and I'm gonna try to do this, Brother Rio, before we get out of our shows and leave our people with some good thoughts. It's from the selections from the Hosea, Sacred Wisdom of Ancient Egypt, and it says from the book of Ptah-hotep, it says, "Be diligent as long as you live, always doing more than is commanded of you. Do not misuse your time while following your heart, for it is offensive to the soul to waste one's time. Do not lose the daily opportunity to increase that which you have. Diligence produces gains, and gains do not endure when diligence is abandoned." Okay, everybody, I appreciate you listening to Melanated Roots Radio. Brother Rio, the knowledge and information was real. We will definitely be on next Monday at 8 o'clock as well, coming to you with another powerful show. Brother Rio, any last words, or are we gone?
No, just be safe out there, family, and let's look after each other, and let's begin to self-cultivate so that we can honestly rely on each other in times that are good as well as in times that are bad. So let's raise up together.
Yes, reduce the external, turn the TV off, the radio, go in a silent place, start learning who you are and how you can raise to your highest self. All right, everybody, we out.
You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com. The views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Whether you're dealing with engineering or technology, when you talk about writing and reading, when you're talking about the refinement of speech, when you talk about grammar or the dialectic, or if you're talking about concepts of astronomy or music.
The people from the Nile Valley were the very first people to develop a concept of time. Time is a concept that sprang from the minds of active people. They were the first people to divide the day into 24 hours. They were the first people to develop the calendar, 365 and a quarter days. They were the first people to build with stone. They were the first people to develop systems of education, the first universities. They invented writing. They invented paper. They developed libraries. They were the first physicians, the first psychologists, the first dentists, the first brain surgeons. They were the first governors, the first rulers, the first men and women to orient structures to celestial bodies in order to harness the spiritual energy